As climate change leads to more extreme weather events, we have to confront the question, how will we rebuild? As these weather events become more frequent, we really need to be considering who will be the people rebuilding, not only preparing for these extreme weather events, but dealing with the aftermath. And today, here to talk about this with us on the conversation is Saket Soni, who's a labor organizer working at the intersection of climate change, migration, and racial justice. Saket is the founder of Resilience Force and just came out with a new book, The Great Escape, a true story of forced labor and immigrant dreams in America. The book is out on Tuesday, or it just came out January 24th, and it's currently #1 on Amazon's immigration and labor policy. I'm Jessica Burbank, thrilled to be joined with Saket. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. Great to be here.
So let's start in October of 2006, the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Can you tell us a little bit about what went down and what your introduction to migration labor was?
Absolutely. Katrina was in many ways the first major climate disaster, at least the first major one that most of us can remember, the first one that got so much national attention. And I was a labor organizer in New Orleans. What I saw was that Katrina had turned the US Gulf Coast into the world's largest construction site. And the people doing the rebuilding were Black and brown workers. They were standing every morning at 5 a.m. under a 60-foot tall monument to Robert E. Lee. Contractors would pull up in buses, workers would clamber on, I'd get on with them, and I'd go and watch them rebuild the dark, distant corners of the Gulf Coast. I was running a small labor rights nonprofit whose mission was to protect these workers as we could. And that's what I was doing when I got the mysterious midnight phone call that put me on the trail of what ended up becoming one of the largest human trafficking schemes in modern US history.
Let's go through a little bit of that history. Were the workers aware of what they were getting into? How did their expectations match up to the reality of the work they found in the United States?
Sure, yeah, the phone call I got was from a man who insisted on remaining anonymous, but I could tell from the way he said my name that he was from India. I'm from India. I came from Delhi to the United States. He said it the way my name is pronounced in my hometown, and I wondered, what was a man from India doing in the ruins of the Mississippi Gulf Coast after Katrina? It turned out he was one of 500 men who was brought to work for a giant oil rig company, an oil rig builder in Mississippi. The workers, all 500 of them, were promised green cards, which means they were promised the chance to get permanent residency and eventually citizenship in the United States, and they were promised good jobs. When they arrived, though, they found that there were never any green cards. The promises were false. They had paid $20,000 for this opportunity. That's generations worth of saving. They sold ancestral lands. They were sold an American dream, but they found themselves dropped in the middle of an American nightmare.
So let's go through a little bit about what happened for all of those people that came to the United States once they got here. Their living conditions were abysmal. Can you walk us through some of them?
Yeah, Jessica, the living conditions were atrocious. The workers were living in a labor camp that even the company called a man camp facility. That was the company's name for where they were living, was a man camp. They were crammed 24 to a trailer. These trailers were placed on top of a toxic waste dump. Workers were living confined in barbed wire fences. They were working round the clock shifts, 12 hours daytime, 12 hours at night, building these oil rigs. And they weren't given as much as proper food to eat while they were doing it. Many workers described how all 3 meals of the day consisted of frozen rice that they would warm up, not with a microwave, but by sucking on it. But the most profound indignities, Jessica, were the ones I learned once I got to know the workers better. So, for example, there was a young man in his late 20s named Ebi Raju. Ebi had gotten married to his wife right before he left, expecting she would be with him 9 months later. That's what the recruiters promised. Well, one day he was 20 feet high on a platform and doing a dangerous drilling job when his phone rang. It was his wife. She was pregnant, and she was now, going into emergency surgery. Then the phone died, and Ebi didn't know what happened. His son was born that day, but Ebi Raju wouldn't see his son, the son that was born that day, for the next 3 years. Those were the kinds of things that workers told me made them want to join our freedom struggle, even though the stakes were so high and it was full of danger.
And you are integral for a lot of these workers in taking their experiences and turning them into labor leaders, which was never their intention coming to the United States. But you profile a few of these cases in the book. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the men who was this incredible just labor leader without having ever been trained for it was a man named Rajan. He was really the kind of partner a labor organizer dreams of. He reached out to me and wanted to meet secretly. All my meetings with these men were secret. They were all clandestine, sometimes in churches, sometimes in hotel rooms. Rajan wanted to meet with me, and over the series of secret meetings, he taught me a lot. He taught me about the pressures the men were experiencing, about what kind of company it was. He also taught me, by the way, how to cook. And over many, many incredible meals, we engineered an escape out of a heist film. The name, The Great Escape, refers to this elaborate, Ocean's 11 type, bank heist style escape that we carried out together. I don't want to give away too much, but involved lots of minibar bottles of wild turkey whiskey, flavored cigars from Mississippi gas stations, and a very elaborate but completely fictitious Indian wedding that provided the pretext to steal the workers out of the labor camp under the noses of the guards, and then put them on a road to a long freedom march to Washington, D.C.
It's truly such an amazing story, and one that I think America might be ready for. Oftentimes, reading the headlines, you see the narrative that these kinds of things don't happen in the United States. How ready do you think the public is in the United States for understanding that really this was a labor camp and this was human trafficking?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand these stories. One of the most important things about this story in particular was, as we were walking to Washington to demand justice from the federal government, what we didn't know was that deep inside the federal government, there was a corrupt agent with his own ties to this very company and his own personal motivations for deporting and jailing the workers, even before we got to DC. On our way, we were surveilled, we were hunted. Workers, eventually found this incredible smoking gun that I don't want to give away, but it had to do with this, incredibly secretive government agent who was really working very hard on his own machinations to unravel our plans. So these are the kinds of stories I think readers are ready for, hungry for even, and I think they really need to be told because we don't want these stories to be repeated. I mean, there have been so many climate disasters since Hurricane Katrina. After each one, immigrant workers are doing massive amounts of rebuilding, but they do it undocumented, unprotected, and under incredibly hazardous conditions. And we need a better deal for those workers.
Right, we've had over 200, $1 billion plus disaster since Hurricane Katrina, which is a lot. And migrant workers have really become the backbone of this disaster rebuilding industry. And you're doing some work in California with a lot of these resilience workers with your nonprofit Resilience Force. Can you speak about the fires in California and some of the flooding mitigation plans the workers have been focused on?
Yes, well, we have crews all over the country. When hurricanes, fires, and floods occur, The workers follow disasters and we follow the workers. My team and I wake up in Home Depot parking lots. We protect them as they get on roofs. In California, there have been successive years of fires in California because of drought. And so our crews in California are making California ready for these fires, making California fire resistant and fire resilient. But those same crews are also doing that work. All of that work is also now preparing California for this massive flooding. It's really the same cycle of work. Now, these can be good jobs, and they can be jobs for millions of people in America, not just immigrants, but many, many more. And that's our hope, that's our effort.
It's really amazing stuff. Can you just let us in on how did these workers get your phone number in the first place to call you to start all of this?
What a great question. I used to spend my mornings starting at 4:35 in the morning distributing flyers. Those flyers would go all over the Gulf Coast, and dozens of workers a day would call me from these bright pink flyers. You couldn't miss them. The thing that was interesting about this group of workers was, they were from India, and that's what made them so mysterious and why I went on a hunt to find them.
It's really amazing. So where would you like folks to find more of your work? And I want to remind everyone that The Great Escape is out now. Definitely check out this book.
Well, this is really just an invitation. If you're reading The Great Escape, reach out. I'm so curious to hear what you think. And to support Resilience Force, just go to resilienceforce.org. And if you are in a disaster-prone state, if you're hit by disaster, reach out to us and tell us how we can help.
Thank you so much for coming on, Saket. This work is so important. I mean, seriously, the grassroots labor organizing that can change, the country and by extension, the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica.